Good afternoon, everybody. This is EHC co-founder, whatever, enabler, Mike Hattery. I'm here to introduce a new little podcast we're going to be doing from week to week with a fellow gambling interest partner of mine, my roommate, Jake Thompson.
Hey, how you doing?
And basically what Jake's going to be doing is we're going to talk about over-unders for the Browns, different specific players, get a feel for it each week, and just kick around ideas about what's going to happen. And, unfortunately, we're both poor college students who don't have a lot of money to gamble. But what we can gamble is our pride. So we're going to kind of make aggressive bets on here. And when we get them really wrong, the few of you that do listen can tell us that we're really wrong. We can't wait for that. So without further ado, the first line we have, the first bet is Terrence West, and it's an over-under. So what do you think about 80 yards, over-under?
I'd say over. I mean, I think he's your bell cow right now. Clearly, you can run on the Ravens.
I mean, I think we've taken a look at, runner efficiency against the Ravens, and they've faced two good rushers in Gio Bernard and Le'Veon Bell, and they've left it in a solid place. But, the Browns' offensive line, the way they've manhandled, I think 80 yards rushing is a very easy over. I'm going to throw you back to Kroll here, and I want to talk about this running game in general, but we'll go to Kroll next. So we have 50 over-under. How many rushing yards?
I'm actually gonna say under on this, just because I think he's your short yardage situation. I could see him getting 2 touchdowns, but I'm not sure that I see 50 yards. And I know that you disagree with that.
I just think that with Kroll we see someone who's particularly explosive, and one of my secret bets that I put on the side here is that I think by the end of the year he leads this Browns team in rushing. Kroll to me is just an absurd talent, and when we look at advanced statistics, though, in football, they're somewhat of a meandering mess. We see that, Kroll looks to have a little more pop in him than we've seen so far, and he's been really impressive from what we've seen, so that excites me. I think ultimately the question is, the Browns are running into what might be their first really solid rushing defense. And to me, the question is, this is a strength. How does it collide with another team's strength? I think the Ravens are not elite, but they're solid. And so the next over-under to me would be, can the Browns put up 150 yards on the ground? And as a connection to that, if they do they win this football game?
I think they absolutely can put 100. I definitely bet the over. I'm not sure. I think you can put up more than 150 and lose or win this game.
Absolutely, and to me, it's hard to buy into. I'm taking the over, absolutely, and I'll guarantee it. This is my lock of the week. The Browns are going to put up more than 150 yards on the ground, and I don't have any doubt. To me, with the stability that Hoyer offers at quarterback, I don't expect, if he makes a mistake, he might make one, but I don't expect a multiple pick, a multiple turnover game from Hoyer. So my key interest would be, if Hoyer's going to be stable and you're putting up 150 yards on the ground, and I'm pretty confident of that, I think you win this football game, and I think that's what's really exciting about this Browns team.
I mean, Mike, that I'm a Patriots fan, and that Week 1 game was a disaster. I would much rather have had Hoyer the Destroyer under center against that Miami team than even Tom Brady. I'm a big fan of Hoyer the Destroyer. There's a reason he has that name. It's not just because it rhymes.
I think it's just because it rhymes. I'm a big fan of it being just because it rhymes, but it's still good just because it rhymes. All right, so now we move to a passing game, which we're not sure Jordan Cameron's going to be on the field. Our one hope is that we can get him on the field. What do? We have Andrew Hawkins. He's going to get at least 10 targets. We have Miles Austin, who was really targeted heavily late in that game and came up with a lot of key catches. So the question is here, we're going to have a couple over-unders with Andrew Hawkins. We have 6 receptions, and then we have 80 yards. So what do you think about both those?
Over on 6 receptions. And I'll take over on 80 yards, too. Because I think he's really getting a little rapport going with Hoyer. He's a slot guy, go-to man. I like it.
Oh, we all love Hawk. Big Hawk fan. I think I really love Hawkins is interesting because he has 2 consecutive weeks with a play of 20-plus yards. So he's not just a high-volume guy. He's a guy who can make plays when he's in space, and Hoyer has proven an ability to get him the ball where he can make plays in space. And I know we've seen, an overinflation of Hoyer and then a deflation of Hoyer, and it's hard to evaluate because he sailed a few throws in Week 1 and Week 2. On the other hand, he had one of the most impressive late-game drives that we've experienced since the Browns returned to Cleveland. I think he and Hawk really do have that rapport, and Hawk has an ability to make big plays, and it's part of the reason why the Browns brought him over to Cincy. He flashed that ability to make plays over 15, 20 yards. For a small guy, it's really impressive, and really why he's one of the more underrated players in the league, in my opinion. And in another system, he would be far more rewarded.
I just think if the only threat for him to get less touches and less than those yards is Miles Austin, kind of got to question things sometimes.
Seriously. I mean, Miles, those were great late game. Ultimately, this team is really a lot more interesting if he can establish himself, not just by being a tidy route runner and being effective, but manning up in the red zone. And while we saw a touchdown catch from Miles Austin, we didn't see the guy who established himself physically, which is what they need opposite from Andrew Hawkins to get Andrew Hawkins a little more space, and ultimately would make this team really interesting. I think if Cameron can play this week, that makes Hawkins just better. I think life gets a lot easier because I think one of the things you're seeing is linebackers dropping back in coverage without the tight end there to pick up the middle of the field, or coming up and run stop, which makes it really impressive how effective the Browns have been on the run without really anyone stretching the field but Hawkins. So I think if Cameron comes back, it makes the run game better, makes it easier for Hawkins to work the middle of the field as well as the runners on passes to the edge. So I think Cameron makes this bet a lot easier. I think he has over 6 receptions or on the number, and I think he has about 90 to 95 yards. And I think we're talking about him as one of the 5 best slot receivers in football.
And you got to think TD's coming.
Oh,
because of that rapport we just spoke about, he's bound to get those targets sooner rather than later.
And I think if you have flash big playability, you will eventually get in the end zone. I think that's one of the things that in baseball we talk about statistics like BABIP. When you flash an ability to break tackles and create plays in space, eventually that leads to you reaching the end zone. Just something we haven't seen yet, and probably makes this passing offense a little more exciting. Now we get to the Browns' defense. We get to talk about them a little bit. And, gosh, all this athleticism, a lot of skilled players. Pettin created a dominant defense in Buffalo last year, which you could argue less talent than they have in Cleveland right now. But hasn't been that flashy. Obviously, a couple of decent matchups, but the Steelers just got manhandled by the Ravens, and the Saints really struggle away from the Dome. So these next few questions are kind of going to address, really how much confidence we have in the Browns' defense to stop opposing playmakers. And the first is Bernard Pierce, and we have his over/under at 60 yards rushing.
And I got to stick with him. I'm not a big fan of Bernard Pierce. You guys, the Browns D is very strong on the run, and I don't believe in Pierce.
Yeah, I think that's probably an unfair over/under because I think most of us would agree that I don't know if Bernard Pierce is the starting running back for the Ravens by week 7, and it's not because of injuries. It's just because he's given plenty of opportunities. He was supposed to start splitting carries with Ray Rice 3 or 4 years ago and become fantasy relevant. And he really has never proven an ability to do that. So I think this is kind of a cheap question. I do think that the Ravens can run a little bit, but not a lot. I think the run defense is going to be really impressive because the Browns have faced Le'Veon Bell, who is really establishing himself as an elite-ish talent in the NFL, and the Saints with a running game that works really well off the passing game, a lot of fresh guys, and a really exciting offense. This brings us to Steve Smith Sr. now. Thankfully, he made that name change to prove that he was more of a prick. But that just fits the status quo of the Ravens. So I guess the first question to me is, who has a better day, Steve Smith or Torrey Smith?
I got to go with Torrey Smith. I see Steve Smith being covered by Hayden all day just because he clearly has become that guy in this Kubiak-led offense in Baltimore. Whereas Torrey Smith, he's going to be matched up against Justin Gilbert, which he's still an unknown quantity at this point. He had a solid week last week, but week one, good question.
So what I expect is, I expect Torrey Smith to have a better game just because I think he's a better athlete. Steve Smith is a pro. He's highly competitive, and that's worth respecting. I would expect that Joe Hayden's going to be bouncing around. I don't think either of them is elite enough that you say, Joe, you're going to be on an island with Steve Smith this week, because I don't think he's that player anymore. I think it's going to be, where Flacco's leaning with the ball. Unfortunately, I think if Steve Smith gets, 3 to 5 ISOs against Justin Gilbert, I think he's a veteran who's going to make him pay. And I think, Gilbert is athletic, he's very talented. I think someone like Smith could, who's experienced and understands what he can take advantage of against defensive backs, could really have success against him. So I fear that. I do think Torrey Smith has a better day just because I think over the top he needs to start working the field. And Joe Flacco is going to have to really, push it out with Torrey. So I guess our over-under question is Steve Smith Sr., over-under 80 yards.
I'm going to say under. Stick with my thoughts as before. I don't think he rips off the big plays that you've seen him in these first 2 weeks.
All right. So last we have our boy Hoyer the Destroyer, and we'll have one more I'm going to throw in real quick here. But we just did a really easy over and under 1 TD for Hoyer.
I'm going to say over, just because I think even if it's like drop-off pass to West, I think he makes 2 TDs.
Absolutely. And lastly, we come to Johnny Manziel. We're going to do a little snap here. Over under 5 snaps behind center for Johnny Football.
Gonna say under, because I think the Browns are in this game right till the end, no matter what, and I think you don't put Manziel in that kind of situation.
I think Hoyer's fourth quarter drive meant more than just the fact that he's really established himself as the leader of this team. I think that it has made Johnny Manziel an irrelevancy. I think that you have to kind of take the gadget away when Brian Hoyer has proven that he can be competent enough to make you a successful and efficient offense. So to me, Hoyer should not have to face that sort of thing, and I think Pettine and Shanahan recognize that. Even though Hoyer's voiced a little comfort, he's been frustrated, and I would respect that for a guy who's really put forth a good effort. So I would say under 5. And lastly, as we close this out, Bovada has the Ravens at -2. We've seen the line at -1. We've seen it at a pick'em. So the final question is, who you got?
Cleveland.
Yeah, I have to take Cleveland too, and partially because I'm a homer, but partially because you got a Cleveland quarterback playing in front of a great crowd, and this team wants revenge on the Ravens. It finally feels like talent-wise we're on the same shelf, and we get to play them at home when talent-wise we're close, and that's really exciting. And I think the talent gap right now between Brian Hoyer and Joe Flacco is fairly marginal. I think our rushing offense is far more talented. I think our defense is pretty fast, although I have some concerns about the Ravens' scheme ability to kind of confuse the Browns early. But I think talent-wise they're very, very close. The Browns are playing at home to a dog pound that's been fed, and that's exciting. So that's about all for us right now. Thanks for dropping by, and Jake and I will be back real soon.